In a year of famine, I became the only thing of value in our family. To raise money for my mother-in-law's medicine, my husband sold me to a wealthy lord to bear him a son. I naively believed that once I gave birth to a son, I could reunite with my husband and return to the way things were before. But my daughter was strangled to death. My son was taken from me, and my face was utterly disfigured. I dragged my battered body back home, only to find my husband embracing his new bride. "You'll be the primary wife. She'll be the concubine," my mother-in-law said. "You bore a son for another man out there. The Lee family cannot let our bloodline die out." In that moment, the sight of my daughter's little body, bruised and purple, and the heart-wrenching cries of my son tore my heart and lungs to shreds. I threw myself against the Lee family's courtyard wall and died. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back on the night before I was sold. By candlelight, my husband clasped my hand, his words full of sincerity. "My life is in your hands. As soon as I have a son, I'll bring you home immediately. I, Lee Wen-han, will never betray you." I merely smiled. All right. Main text. My last memory of my past life was the excruciating pain as my head struck the courtyard wall. My vision blurred. In the dim candlelight, Lee Wen-han's kneeling figure appeared distorted and wavering. "Ying, only you can save Mother. Without medicine, Mother will die of her illness." Those heart-wrenching words jolted me back to consciousness. I had returned back to the night before I was sold into marriage. On the bed, my mother-in-law coughed so violently it tore at my heart. Her collar was splattered with fresh blood. 2 years ago, on a day of heavy snow, she had taken me in when I was nearly frozen to death. To repay that kindness, I worked like a slave, tending to her and her son, washing and mending clothes, and supporting Lee Wen-han's education. But he was a hopeless case. He gambled away our entire fortune. And now creditors come knocking day and night. My gaze swept over the double happiness character still fresh on the bedhead. It felt nothing but ironic. 3 months ago, having just turned 17, I married into the Lee family as expected. Back then, he held my hands and said, "Once we're married, I'll definitely change." But that afternoon, old Lady Qian from the neighboring village came to our house, saying that beyond the mountains, there was a wealthy gentleman over 30 who, having no heir, was the subject of gossip. The elders of his clan were urging him to take a concubine, but his wife refused. She would only allow him Torrenton from outside. If I was willing, he was willing to pay 50 taels of silver. 50 taels of silver. Enough for Lee Wen-han to pay off his gambling debts and buy medicine. And enough for him to pawn his own wife off to others to be treated like an animal. Seeing me remain silent for so long, Lee Wen-han shoved me to the ground. "Do you think I want to pawn my wife to someone else? But what choice do I have? If things go on like this, we'll both die." Images from my past life, my hands covered in blood, flashed before my eyes. I had survived against all odds to give birth to 2 sons. The silver I'd traded my life for saved them and their mother. But when I'd suffered every torment and sent a blood-stained letter through an intermediary, who was there to save me? That mother and son feigned poverty and made excuses, only to turn around and make preparations for a new bride to enter the house. I raised my eyes and fixed him with a piercing stare. "Are you really going to pawn me off?" Lee Wen-han thought I had changed my mind and immediately raised 3 fingers to the sky, swearing an oath. "As long as you bear a son for that master, I'll bring you home immediately. If I, Lee Wen-han, ever betray you, may my family be destroyed and I meet a miserable end." As he spoke, he actually squeezed out 2 tears. "Just agree to this once, will you? My family destroyed. A miserable end." I repeated the words expressionlessly, glancing at the box under the bed. He had already taken the silver. When had I ever had a choice? I forced the tears back into my eyes and offered a faint smile. "All right." A few days later, witnessed by members of both families, Lee Wen-han signed a contract with the Zhao family. The words echoing from the ancestral hall remained as jarring as ever. The signatory, Li Wenhan, due to his mother's illness and family poverty, voluntarily pledges his wife, Lady Lin, to the Zhao family for 3 years. Any children born shall be considered heirs of the Zhao family. If no son is born within 3 years, the term may be extended by 2 years. Failure to redeem her by the deadline shall result in forfeiture. Before parting, Li Wenhan pretended to clasp his head and weep. The Zhao family's estate is far away. You take care. I sneered inwardly. At this point, and you're still putting on a show. I suddenly burst into loud sobs. Glancing back with every step. Husband, you must pull yourself together. Today you've pawned me. Could it be that tomorrow you'll pawn our mother too? Husband, stop gambling. Find a job. Mother's life depends on you. Pawn money can sustain us for a time, but not for a lifetime. The murmurs of onlookers never ceased. Li Wenhan's face turned ashen. He slammed the door and fled into the house in disarray. Granny Qian shoved me into the palanquin. After a bumpy ride, we finally arrived at the Zhao residence before dusk. Because of my lowly status, I could only enter through the side gate. Inside, the mistress was already waiting, flanked by 2 maidservants and an elderly housekeeper. The moment I saw her face, my whole body began to tremble uncontrollably, and hatred surged within me. Only I knew what kind of venomous heart lay hidden beneath that Buddha-like facade. She scrutinized me from head to toe. Her brows furrowed. From the very moment I set foot in this courtyard, she must have hated me with a passion. Right afterward, the mistress ordered me to bathe in a side room. She sat nearby, watching me undress with a sneer, lecturing me on the household rules. Your sole purpose is to bear a son for the Zhao family. Put those unworthy thoughts out of your mind. If you behave yourself, perhaps I'll elevate you to the rank of concubine someday. But if you don't behave, I'll make sure you pay dearly. I'd heard these words hundreds of times before, even if I walked on eggshells. How could I ever escape her torment? I bowed my head deeply, my shoulders trembling slightly. Yes, madam, I understand. Only when she saw me so submissive did she leave. Satisfied. That night, the master pushed open the door. What are you standing there for? Undress. In my past life, the master was no saint, yet he never once laid a hand on me. I remember the day I gave birth. His voice came from outside the courtyard. From now on, provide her with the provisions befitting a concubine. But in the end, it was the mistress who held the reins in the inner quarters. He could offer me the mere shadow of a proper status, yet he could not shield me from those underhanded schemes. When the lady slashed my face with a silver hairpin, he may have known, or perhaps not, but in the end, he remained silent. It was my own foolishness, clinging to Li Wenhan's promises and fearing the lady's schemes, that kept me from ever showing him my true self. Only now do I realize that the only thing that could have saved me was a single word from him. I stood by the bed, head bowed, my voice trembling with fear. Master, since you were sold as a wife, you must have served others before. Why all this affected coyness? His voice was icy. The mistress must have been spewing venom. My hands trembled as I clumsily tried to undo the button collar. Losing patience, he suddenly blew out the candle and pressed himself roughly against me. His hands roamed wildly over my body, each touch carrying a sense of plunder, without a shred of tenderness, without a moment's preparation. A tearing pain struck me instantly. Cold sweat trickled down my temples, and my body tensed up. His movements came to an abrupt halt. By the moonlight seeping in through the window, he saw the marks on the sheets, and his breathing grew rough. I, however, took the opportunity to curl closer into his embrace, tears falling one by one onto the back of his hand as I sobbed softly. My husband, he has an ailment. Sure enough, the hand resting on my waist softened noticeably, and with a hint of hesitation, He brushed the strands of hair from my forehead a moment later. He then summoned a maid to help me wash up before dressing and leaving. I knew he was returning to the mistress's chambers. They had been betrothed since childhood. Childhood sweethearts. Had it not been for the mistress's frail health, her inability to conceive after losing her only child, there likely would be no place for me in this mansion. Miss, let me help you wash up. A familiar voice sounded timidly as she entered carrying hot water. Seeing me staring blankly at the door, she whispered comfortingly, Miss, please don't be sad. On the first night, Master must save face for the mistress. Xiao Cui. I grabbed her wrist. In my past life, she was the only one willing to help me, only to be beaten to death by the mistress for delivering a message on my behalf. Clang. The bucket clattered to the floor. I cupped her face and said, word by word, in this life, we will both be fine. At the crack of dawn the next day, as I was styling my hair before the bronze mirror, the mistress burst in with her maidservant. Spotting the lingering red marks on my neck, her knuckles turned white as she clenched her fists. And her smile turned grim. You must drink this fertility medicine on time if you're to bear the master a son soon. Someone. Before her words had even finished, an old servant standing nearby was already waiting with a black earthenware bowl. She pried open my jaws, and the scalding herbal decoction was poured down my throat. Only after the mistress had left, satisfied, did Xiaocui dare to rush over, using a damp cloth to soothe my face. Miss, are you all right? I struggled to my feet, bracing myself against the bed, and wiped the salty, metallic taste from the corner of my mouth. It's only just begun. As night fell, the rain fell in a steady patter. The master came as usual, without the impatience he'd shown the day before. He sat in the pearwood chair by the window, took a sip of tea, and looked at me appraisingly. How old are you? I cast aside yesterday's timidity and replied crisply, Sir, I have just turned 17. Where are you from? I lifted my face, a smile playing at the corners of my mouth, my eyes brimming with longing, to compare Westlake to Shizi, whether lightly or heavily made up. She is always lovely. My hometown is precisely the place described in that poem. Have you been to school? A flicker of surprise crossed his eyes. I shook my head. My father taught me a few characters before he passed. This verse was one he often recited. I heard it so often that I memorized it. Jiangnan, 1,000 miles away. He looked pensive. My eyes welled up instantly, and my throat tightened. 2 years ago, our whole family fled the famine. My parents, both died, leaving only me, lying in the snow. It was the matriarch of the Li family who found me. I wonder if she's recovered. The master fell silent for a moment, a complex, indecipherable expression in his eyes. They sold you into servitude, and yet you. He didn't finish his sentence, merely sighing before rising to leave. The moment the door closed, every trace of my pitiful demeanor vanished completely, and I gazed out the window with utter indifference. I was, after all, the daughter of an official, exiled for a crime. I had been trained in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting since childhood. Literacy was the least of my skills. 3,000 li of hard labor. My parents had shielded me from bandits' blades with their own lives, only to save this broken existence of mine. I have told none of this to anyone, not even Li Wenhan. For several days in a row, the master has set foot in my courtyard. I know he is here for the sake of an heir, yet I go along with it. At times, he holds a primer, furrowing his brow as he points to the character life circled in red ink. At other times, he stares blankly at a line of poetry. Once his confusion was cleared, he would look as if a light had suddenly dawned on him. So that's how it is. Master knows everything. Occasionally, he would speak of his travels in his youth, describing foreign gems as brilliant as stars, and the winds of the northern frontier as strong enough to split rocks. I would rest my chin in my hand and listen quietly. When the story became particularly captivating, I couldn't help but exclaim, "Wouldn't that blow people away?" The winds of Jiangnan, on the other hand, just make one's skin tingle. This always made him laugh. His gaze would sweep over my eyes and brows, unconsciously softening, yet he still never stayed the night. Before leaving every single time he would always instruct me, "If there's anything you don't understand, write it down and ask me tomorrow." Bang! The door burst open, and Madame was in her usual stern mood. Huang Ma. She sat down without a word, picked up the tea the maid had offered, and without even lifting her eyelids, "Last night in the West Wing, how many times did you call for water?" Report to Madame. 3 times. Aunt Huang stammered. Clang. The scalding teacup slammed hard against my shoulder, and the searing pain made me gasp. The mistress sprang to her feet and shouted harshly, "Needle her." 2 maids pinned me to the ground, and Aunt Huang drew 3 silver needles, aiming them at my fingertips and driving them viciously into the spaces between my nails. Ugh! Excruciating pain exploded through me, and a maid standing nearby stuffed a piece of coarse cloth prepared in advance into my mouth. Cold sweat soaked through my undergarments, and my vision began to darken. She was a master at this. She never left visible wounds, yet made life feel worse than death. As she left, she leaned down and said coldly, "If the master finds out even a fraction of this, I'll make you suffer 1,000 times over." I curled up on the floor and called out hoarsely to Xiao Chui, who was rummaging for ointment. "What day is it today?" She turned around in a panic, her voice trembling with tears. "Miss, it's the 14th of September. Tomorrow is the Mid-Autumn Festival. Barring any surprises, Master will receive an urgent order tonight and must leave early tomorrow morning to escort a shipment. He'll be gone for 7 days." Gritting my teeth, I forced myself to sit up and fished a finished embroidered pouch from the bottom of the trunk. "Is everything ready?" Xiao Chui pulled a wax paper wrapper from her sleeve, her fingertips trembling violently. It's all here." Sure enough, after nightfall, there was a constant coming and going in the outer courtyard. The servants were busy packing their belongings, and the lamps burned until well past midnight. At the first light of dawn, I arranged my hair into a simple bun before the bronze mirror, changed my clothes, and headed out. "Let's go. We'll deliver the pouch." Xiao Chui's eyes were filled with fear. She instinctively reached out to grab my arm. Perhaps I should go instead. If the mistress finds out, I'm afraid. I gently patted the back of her hand, my steps showing not a hint of hesitation. This was the first time I had ever stepped outside this courtyard. The servants along the way hurriedly lowered their heads, stealing glances at me out of the corners of their eyes. "Master. Miss Lin. Miss Lin is here." The servant at the door rubbed his hands, unsure how to address me. There was a long silence inside before a deep voice finally spoke. "Come in." I pushed open the door and walked straight to the writing desk, gently placing the pouch upon it. Then knelt with a thud, my forehead pressed against the floor tiles. "I beg you, Master, please take this pouch with you." He looked somewhat displeased. "What is the meaning of this?" When I raised my head again, tears were streaming down my cheeks. Last night I had a nightmare. I dreamed that you were entangled by a venomous snake, and it seemed as though you were about to. At that point, I could speak no more, choking on my sobs, but he suddenly chuckled softly. Only then did he set down his brush, rise to his feet, and reach out to help me up. "It's just a dream. Can you really take it seriously?" I shook my head frantically, holding back my tears. "But I'm afraid." "I beg you, Master, please take it with you. It contains herbs to ward off evil spirits and snakes. It will surely keep you safe." He sighed helplessly. "I'll take it." Then, seeing that I was still staring at him through tear-filled eyes, He simply picked up the pouch and tied it to his waist right in front of me. All right. Go back now. I curtsied and turned to leave. What I had to do next was simply endure these 7 days. No sooner had Master left the estate than Madame burst through the door with her attendants, her fury several times more intense than usual. 3 maids pinned me to the ground, her embroidered shoes crushing the back of my hand. The rough brick ground my flesh raw. You're nothing but a trinket sent over by the Zhao family, and yet you dare to be so unruly. Have you already forgotten your humble home in Beijing village? Madame Huang, with practiced ease, drove 10 silver needles into the crevices of my fingernails. Agonizing pain pierced through my heart and lungs. I bit down hard on my lip. The taste of iron-tinged blood spread in my mouth. Yet not a sound escaped me. The mistress sneered. Quite the fighter. The last one who dared to be unruly is now in a brothel, ridden by thousands and trampled by tens of thousands. A lowly wretch like you belongs there. She suddenly grabbed my hair, forcing me to look up. At worst, I'll buy you in 3 years. Your husband might not even mind. Before leaving, she ordered 2 maids, every day at noon. Make her kneel outside the courtyard for 2 full hours. After all, she doesn't need her legs to bear children even if she becomes lame. It won't matter. Lowly. Unruly. I suddenly let out a low laugh, my laughter growing louder and louder. In my previous life, I cowered in this courtyard, never once overstepping my bounds. Yet didn't I still end up like this? After all, she doesn't dare kill me right now. Let's just wait and see. After several consecutive days of forced kneeling, my knees swelled as large as steamed buns. The blood clotted in the crevices of my fingernails turned purplish black. I silently counted the days, forcing myself to endure. At noon on the 7th day, just as a maid was shoving me to my knees, I saw Xiao Chui rush back in a panic, her eyes darting about. The madam burst through the courtyard gate right behind her, clutching a half-page of paper I had written, her voice shrill. So you can actually read and write. You dare write a letter back to the Li family to spread gossip. I raised my eyes to meet hers, a touch of defiance in my gaze. Madam, it was Master who taught me. He even taught me to recite poetry. Before she could scold me further, I began to recite on my own. If love is meant to last, why must it be together day and night? Clang! The teapot and cups were swept to the floor. Madam was trembling with rage as she pointed at me. You wretch! She turned and snatched the bamboo splint from Mother Huang's hands. Her eyes bloodshot. Today, I will cripple these hands of yours. Stop! A familiar voice rang out suddenly. My whole body went limp, and the pain and exhaustion that had built up over 7 days surged through me, and I collapsed straight to the ground. When I opened my eyes again, the room had returned to normal, though the candlelight was a bit blinding. Xiao Chui was wiping away tears nearby. Seeing me sit up, she hurried to support me. Miss, you've been unconscious for a day and a night. You must be hungry. I'll go get you something to eat right away. When I raised my hand, I noticed it was wrapped in clean gauze, and my knee was covered in soft cloth. Before long, the table was filled with exquisite small dishes, along with several plates of pastries I'd never seen before. As she served the food, she muttered, "When you sent me to inform on you, I thought you'd been beaten senseless by the mistress. That caniot was just a hair's breadth away." She patted her chest, still shaken by the memory. Strange as it may seem, Master just happened to return today right on time. I awkwardly picked up some food with my chopsticks, listening to her chatter, and felt a strange sense of peace. She suddenly lowered her voice, though she couldn't hide her excitement. I overheard the kitchen maids gossiping at noon. The master flew into a terrible rage yesterday. He scolded the mistress harshly, then personally summoned a doctor to tend to your injuries. Seeing a rare smile cross my face, she smiled too. That's a relief. The mistress won't dare give you a hard time anymore. I gently poked her in the side. It's still early days, but at least things will be quiet for a few days. Just as we were laughing, The door hinges creaked softly. "What are you two talking about?" Laughing so heartily, I hurried to stand up, but stumbled slightly. The master took a step forward, wrapped his arm around my waist, and without a word, pressed me back against the bed. "Your knee is injured. Why are you moving around so much?" I lowered my eyes, unable to meet his gaze, my cheeks flushing slightly. "Master, when did you return?" "Yesterday." His gaze lingered on the bandage for a moment. "The mistress." The moment I heard those two words, I instinctively tensed up, clutching the quilt. He sensed my unease and gently stroked my back, though his tone remained calm. "Romer has a quick temper. I've already scolded her. This won't happen again." I nodded obediently, blaming myself. "It's all my fault. I shouldn't have sent you that pouch. It caused the lady to misunderstand." At the mention of the pouch, his eyes lit up slightly, and his tone took on a hint of amusement. "You've actually hit the mark by accident." He curved his lips into a rare smile and pulled the pouch from his bosom. On the way, a nest of venomous snakes suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Just as they were about to strike, I scattered the powder inside in a panic, and those snakes actually retreated. Surprise and relief flashed in my eyes. It actually worked. "Thank goodness you're unharmed, Master." He gave a low nod, tucking the pouch back into his robe. "Well then, it's getting late. You should get some rest." With that, he began to rise. "Master," I called out almost instinctively, gently tugging at the corner of his sleeve hanging by his side. My cheeks flushed. "Today. You." He paused, his fingertips brushing my forehead ever so lightly. "There's no rush for the next day or two." As he withdrew his hand, his voice grew hoarse. "Get well first." Over the next 2 months, life finally became a little more peaceful, though Madame still treated me with cold indifference. She no longer laid a hand on me. Master still did not spend the night, but every few days he would come to join me for supper, exchanging a few casual words about family matters. It was not like in my past life, when he viewed me merely as an object to warm the bed and bear children. One morning, I stepped out into the courtyard with a sense of wonder and spread my palm to catch a snowflake. Xiao Chui ran out to drape a cloak over me. "You really do have the heart of a child, Miss. It snows every year, be careful not to catch a chill." I smiled and gently placed my hand on my lower abdomen. That evening, the master came to dine. His gaze lingered on my face for a moment. Then he teased suddenly. "You seem to have filled out a bit." I quickly cupped my face and pouted. "It's just my hairpin, it makes my face look round. I won't wear it like that next time." The smile in his eyes deepened as his gaze drifted downward. "It's not just your face." I blushed and gently pushed him away. "Try this fish while it's hot. It's very fresh. Once the lake freezes over in a few days, it'll be hard to get a taste of this." He suppressed his smile and turned his gaze to the shadows of falling snow on the window, a hint of worry clouding his eyes. "This year's snow seems to be falling with unusual intensity." My heart sank. As I recalled my past life, this year had been a year of a rare snow disaster. The heavy snow fell for 7 straight days, blocking the roads. The estate's grain reserves were depleted, and we only managed to weather the crisis thanks to timely aid from the mistress's maternal family. As a result, the master came to rely on her even more. "Master." I set down my chopsticks, rose to my feet, and bowed. "Traveling in winter is difficult, especially with signs of heavy snow already upon us. In my opinion, we should stock up on long-lasting provisions and charcoal now, just in case, if there is any surplus come spring. We could set up a soup kitchen to feed the displaced. It would be a fine deed." The master fell silent for a moment, his gaze toward me tinged with approval. "It's rare for you to be so thoughtful. I'll have the mistress handle this matter tomorrow." As he spoke, he placed another piece of deboned fish into my bowl. Before I could take a bite, I couldn't help but turn away and retch. What's wrong? The master set down his chopsticks and motioned for Xiao Chui to pour tea. Is it too rich? Have some tea to settle your stomach. I felt both anxious and embarrassed. Perhaps because there had been no good news in the household for so long. He hadn't even considered that possibility. I looked up at him and called out, "Master." He smiled helplessly. Assuming I simply found the tea too bitter. You're becoming quite feisty. Xiao Chui, go to the kitchen and warm up some milk. I steeled myself, took his hand, and placed it on my lower abdomen. Perhaps I'm with child. His hand froze, and his voice took on a note of urgency. Is that true? Have you had a doctor examine you? I shook my head and explained softly. Just these past few days. The mere scent of certain things makes me feel nauseous. Back in the village, it seemed all pregnant women were like this. He stood up, a hint of reproach in his voice. Why didn't you have a doctor come to examine you, Xiao Chui? I hurriedly held him back. Master, it's getting late. Let's ask for one tomorrow. Could you stay with me tonight? This was the first time since I'd entered the mansion that I'd asked him to stay. He stood where he was, gazing down at me, but eventually turned and walked toward the door. I felt a pang of disappointment. Could I really not keep him here? Ah Chang, go tell Madam I won't be coming over tonight. I snapped my head up, my eyes stinging with tears. It worked. Early the next morning, Madam arrived with the doctor in tow. Her eyes were dark with bags, yet her face was still plastered with a smile. I heard you weren't feeling well, so I specially invited the doctor to take a look. The doctor took my pulse for a moment, then rose and bowed to the master. Congratulations, Master. Congratulations, Madam. Miss Lin is with child already more than a month along. Madam immediately leaned over to the bedside and took my hand, though her grip tightened slightly. What wonderful news. You must take good care of yourself, my dear. She gave a soft cough and exchanged a knowing glance with the doctor. The doctor understood at once. However, Miss Lin has a delicate constitution and requires complete rest. It would be unwise for her to continue serving the master for the next few months. That is only right. The master agreed at once. Once the master and the doctor had left, the mistress stopped pretending. Don't get too cocky. Once you've given birth, you'll go back to the Li family and stay there. She feigned distress once more, pulling out a handkerchief to cover her mouth and nose. But if it's a daughter, she'll be of no use. I clenched my fists so tightly my nails dug into my flesh. Yet I remained meek and submissive. Yes, Madam's son. Come in. The mistress called out. A short, stout matron entered at the sound of her voice. The mistress gave her a sidelong glance. From now on, you will be in charge of Miss Lin. There must not be the slightest mishap. Madam's son hurried forward, patting her chest and smiling. Please rest assured, Madam, I have attended to 7 or 8 women in childbirth. I guarantee it will go smoothly for you. But I stared at her intently. In my previous life, I had trusted that innocent facade and let her force-feed me a constant stream of tonics. As a result, when the time came to give birth, the baby was too large and the delivery was difficult. After struggling to bring my daughter into the world, I hadn't even had a chance to look at her before she turned and handed her to the mistress. Seeing it was a girl, the mistress, fearing I might share her favor, strangled her to death right in front of me, and no amount of pleading on my part could change her mind. In the end, the world was told only that I had given birth to a stillborn. I lowered my head to hide my hatred and struggled to utter a few words. Thank you for your trouble, Mother. In the days that followed, snow indeed fell as if the heavens had burst. The grain shops on the streets had long since closed their doors. Even at exorbitant prices, it was hard to find a single bushel of rice or a basin of charcoal. Occasionally, frozen vagrants would collapse in the corners of walls. Outside the city, temporary shelters had been set up to collect the bodies. Fortunately, having heeded my advice earlier, The household had stockpiled enough grain to last 3 full months. Though we had to ration our supplies, we were at least able to see the new year through in relative peace. The master's gaze toward me had also grown more inquiring, and occasionally during council meetings, he would ask for my opinion as well, although the mistress rarely visited. She sent gifts frequently, and my food, clothing, and daily necessities gradually became more refined. One day, Madame's son brought in bird's nest soup again. As I held the bowl and sipped slowly, I caught a glimpse out of the corner of my eye that the hem of her trousers was completely soaked. Unless she had been to the main hall, she would never have waded through such deep snow, but getting rid of her would not be an easy task. Just as she turned to leave, I suddenly spoke up. I recall that Madame's grandson will be turning 4 after the new year, won't he? When she turned back, her face was practically beaming. You actually still remember. That little rascal is quite a handful these days. In my past life, just a few days after the snow stopped, Aunt's son had rushed to take leave and returned home, and later I vaguely heard the maids in the mansion gossiping among themselves that her grandson hadn't survived that heavy snowfall. I watched the uncontrollable concern in her eyes, and a plan gradually took shape in my mind, rather than eliminating one only to have another take their place. Why not put her to work for me? I leisurely added a piece of charcoal to the brazier and said in a gentle tone, with the snow falling so heavily, it must be even harder to endure outside the city. I'm still early in my pregnancy, so it won't be a problem for me. If you're worried about your family, why not go ask the lady for help? The smile on Aunt Sun's lips froze completely, and her eyes darted about. This old servant. I've already asked, but... I quickly furrowed my brow, my tone tinged with concern. This snow came so suddenly. All the shops have long since closed. If anyone were to fall ill, I fear there'd be nowhere to get medicine. The more I spoke, the more grim Mother-son's expression grew. She clutched the hem of her robe tightly, then finally steeled her resolve and knelt with a thud. Please, young lady, help your servant. That child has suffered from a cough since the start of winter. With the bitter cold like this, my heart is in my throat. I didn't agree immediately, but simply looked troubled. Me, I'm just a former steward's daughter from the Zhao household. What could I possibly do? Mrs. Sun looked up at me, no longer hiding her true feelings. You're a sensible young lady. Everyone knows you've come here because you've nowhere else to turn. But just look at how the master treats you. It's clear you're a woman of means. I snorted lightly. You're clever. But this is a difficult matter. If I go against Madame's wishes, I won't fare well either. Seeing that I hadn't outright refused, Aunt Sun grasped the implication behind my words. As long as you're willing to help, I'll certainly stand by you in the future. Having an extra pair of hands is always a good thing. Seeing the genuine desperation in her eyes, I finally relented. Why are you still kneeling? Madam, go back and tidy up, then wait for word. Once Madame's son had left, I immediately instructed Xiao Chui, go to the backyard and cut a slender bamboo stalk, then fetch some rice paper and fine thread. Xiao Chui was puzzled. What do you need these for, miss? To make something that will catch master's attention. I gazed out the window at the snowstorm growing fainter in the distance, a look of worry on my face. Ever since winter set in, Madame's health has been poor. Master has been staying in the main hall these past few days and hasn't come by for 5 or 6 days now. I simply must find an excuse to see him. As night fell, lanterns began rising from my courtyard, their thudding sounds echoing from time to time. What's that? Sky lanterns. Why are they making noise? Country bumpkin. They've got paper drums pasted inside. The servants chattered, peering over the courtyard wall. In less than the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, the master came over, sounding a bit reproachful. This is sheer nonsense. The roads are slippery in the snow. What are you doing out here? I knew he wasn't truly angry. Pointing at the lanterns in the sky, I smiled. Master, Luke, isn't it beautiful? He casually picked up one I hadn't released yet and read the poem inscribed on it. Year after year. May all be to your liking. May peace and joy forever be with you. It's a fine poem, but your handwriting needs more practice. I puffed out my cheeks and turned my head away. It's because you didn't teach me well, master. He merely replied with indulgent affection. Very well, very well. Once you've finished hanging them, go inside quickly. I took out another blank lantern. I saved this one for you. Master, please write a blessing on it. He wrote a few words in a flowing hand. Peace and prosperity for the entire household. Seeing that he was in a good mood, I seized the opportunity to say, Master, grandmother's son has been very devoted in caring for me. But my grandson at home has come down with a cough. He's been restless day and night these past few days. It's truly pitiful to watch. Now that my pregnancy is stable, why not grant her a few days' leave to go home and see him? It would also be a blessing for the child in my womb. Without giving it much thought, he nodded in agreement. Hurry inside. It's windy out here. Inside. The candlelight flickered, and the brazier burned brightly, leaning back on the daybed. I placed my hand gently on my lower abdomen and lowered my voice. Master, if this child turns out to be a daughter, will you disown her? A hint of irritation flashed across his brow. When did I ever say I would? Whether boy or girl. She is a descendant of the Zhao family. How could I just cast her aside? But I wouldn't let it go. Muttering sullenly, that sounds nice enough. But if it's a daughter, who knows how much you'll secretly despise her. In any case, if you don't want her, I'll take her back to the Li family. If the Li family doesn't want her, I'll support her even if I have to go out and do laundry and mending. He was truly provoked and slammed his hand on the table. Lin Yingying, what do you take me for? Only those with narrow-minded views would look down on a daughter. And what do you mean by taking me back to the Li family? He glared at me, his anger boiling over. You are now a member of the Zhao household. Stop mentioning the Li family or the Wang family and don't even think about it in the future. My eyes stung with tears, and I choked out. After I give birth, we'll be separated. Once the 3-year term is up, I'll have to return to the Li family. All of this is nothing but a fleeting dream. Master's face turned ashen. He stood up and paced back and forth, seething with frustration but unable to vent his anger. Finally, he slammed the door and stormed out. His roar echoed from the courtyard. Xiao Cui, burn all her useless books. I never should have taught her to read in the first place. Xiao Cui entered, responding with a look of dismay. Miss, why are you doing this to yourself? The master rarely visits, and you've driven him away again. Seeing her indignant expression, I couldn't help but smile. You have to cry to get your way. Someone who's usually well-behaved but throws a tantrum now and then is actually more memorable. Besides, only by putting master on a pedestal and laying the groundwork properly will it be more advantageous for me and the child. Bring me paper and a pen. Then I picked up the pen and skillfully imitated Li Wenhan's handwriting. Composing a family letter. Xiao Cui. Remember what I'm about to say. Early the next morning, Xiao Cui rushed back into the room, gulping down tea. Miss, you're truly amazing. I set down the tiger head shoes I'd been embroidering and raised an eyebrow. Tell me what happened. I was just about to go to the kitchen when Ah Chang stopped me and took me to the study. Her eyes were wide with disbelief. The master did indeed ask what you've been busy with lately, so I did just as you taught me. I told him you'd received a letter from the Li family a few days ago, and that you'd cried over it all night, not even eating a meal. The moment he heard that, Master flew into a rage and demanded to know the contents of the letter. I told him I couldn't read, so he ordered me to find a way to steal the letter out of there. I handed her the letter. Go laddered and give yourself away. Xiao Cui was still a bit flustered. Miss, aren't you afraid Master will investigate? Investigate what? I smiled faintly. I have a proper husband. I'm not a legitimate concubine of the Zhao household. If word got out, it would look like he'd stolen another man's wife, for the sake of the Zhao family's reputation. He'd never make a scene. A few more days passed, and the wind and snow finally stopped. Though the master didn't come to visit, Xiao Chui slipped some small change to a servant in the outer courtyard and learned the master had actually summoned several trusted men, who disguised themselves as bandits and went to Beijing village. They cornered Li Wenhan at the village entrance and beat him soundly. I heard he even lost 2 teeth, though I knew this physical pain was nowhere near a fraction of what I had endured in my previous life. The pent-up frustration in my heart finally began to dissipate somewhat. Just as we were speaking, the cotton curtain was pulled aside from outside. Mama's son had returned. The moment she entered the room, she knelt on the ground, tears streaming down her aged face. "Miss, you've shown me such great kindness. If you hadn't pleaded with the master to let me return, and if you hadn't secured some medicine and provisions from the storeroom, my poor grandson, I'm afraid he truly wouldn't have survived." I reached out to help her up, gently stroking my lower abdomen as I breathed a sigh of relief. I had thought I could hold on until the time of my delivery, but unforeseen events always arrive faster than expected. Envoys from the mistress's maternal family had arrived. On the very first day, I was summoned to the main hall to observe the proper etiquette. Leaning on my 7-month-old belly, I stood beneath the eaves. Within moments, I was drenched in sweat, and my head felt heavy with dizziness. The old lady twirled the lid of her teacup between her fingers, gently stirring the tea, without even lifting her eyelids. "Stand up straight. There's no need to put on such a pretentious act. The master has gone out of town to collect debts these past few days. No one can save you now." The mistress wiped away tears beside her. "Mother, this wretch is so lowlish," caused the master and me to quarrel several times. Seeing my pale face, she hesitated slightly. "But she's heavily pregnant now. What if you are the mistress of this household? A mere pawned-off servant girl, has she gone and rebelled?" She glanced at me, her tone even harsher. "There are plenty of women who can bear children. Does she think she can act so high and mighty just because she's carrying a child? Do you really think master would turn against our Bai family for her sake? Rest assured, I've already consulted the physician. Your pregnancy is stable. Standing here for a few hours won't do you any harm." It was not until evening that I was finally allowed to return. Xiao Chui had been waiting at the door. Seeing my state, she hurriedly brought out a cold cloth to place on my forehead, then served me a medicinal broth to cool my body and stabilize the pregnancy. Every time I step into the main hall, it feels like I'm being skinned alive. What on earth am I to do? In my previous life, the old Madame Bai never visited, and I knew very little about her. Given all that's happened now, it's likely that as my influence grows, the mistress fears she won't be able to keep me in check once I've given birth. So she's deliberately sent my maternal relatives to give me a stern warning. At the very least, I must hold on until master returns. "Miss Lin, please hurry and get yourself ready. Don't keep the old lady and the mistress waiting too long." Lu Qing, the head maid at the mistress's side, stood in the doorway, her tone sharp and impatient. I was leaning against the bed, clutching my waist, and simply couldn't move. "Miss Lu Qing, I'm truly unwell today. Please inform them on my behalf. I will certainly go to pay my respects and apologize to the old lady and the mistress tomorrow." Lu Qing immediately rolled her eyes and flung the handkerchief in her hand toward her waist. "The old lady rarely makes a visit. It wouldn't be proper for you not to go, would it? If you want to go back, go yourself. Didn't make things difficult for us servants." Xiao Chui couldn't help but speak up from the side. "Can't you see our young mistress is unwell with her pregnancy?" A sharp smack hit Xiao Chui off, and Lu Qing scolded harshly. "What do you mean?" The mistress said Miss Lin was bought back at the end of the day. "She's a servant, no different from us. Xiao Tsue, don't forget you are a servant of the Zhao household." She turned to me. Miss Lin. Please hurry. If we have to send a few matrons to fetch you later, it will be embarrassing for everyone. Don't you agree? Gritting my teeth, I forced myself to sit up and said softly, I'll go. You wait outside. As soon as Lu Qing left, I immediately signaled to Auntie Sun. She swiftly retrieved the prepared peanut paste from the bottom of my trousseau and smeared it over my body, then carefully wiped away the traces with a damp cloth. I've been unable to tolerate this substance since childhood. Even the slightest touch causes large patches of red rashes to appear. In less than half the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, fine red spots began to appear on my face, spreading down my neck toward my chest. The itching was excruciating, but I had to endure it and not scratch. Xiao Chui grew anxious. Miss, could this be serious? Don't worry. It just looks scary, I gasped, pressing my hand to my lower abdomen. Hurry and call Lu Qing in. When she lifted the curtain to enter, her eyes widened in shock, and she let out a shriek. Good heavens! This! She turned and ran straight for the main hall. In less than a quarter of an hour, the madam and the old lady arrived in a hurry, accompanied by the doctor. The moment they entered and saw me in this state, they both took a half step back in shock. The doctor stepped forward to take my pulse, then examined the red rash on my body closely before saying in a solemn tone, Madam, old lady, Miss Lin has developed hives. It appears she accidentally came into contact with something unclean, causing wind toxin to erupt externally. Furthermore, the young lady is in a delicate condition. Her worries and anxieties have caused internal heat to flare up, which is why the symptoms are so severe. Fortunately, the fetus is stable. Once I prescribe 2 doses of a formula to dispel wind and eliminate toxins, it should subside within a few days. Hearing the doctor's confident assurance that the fetus is stable, the mother and daughter breathed a slight sigh of relief, but waved their hands impatiently. Then please prescribe the medicine at once. She's just so dramatic and high maintenance. After they left, I collapsed completely onto the bed. Having tossed and turned these past 2 days, I'd finally pieced together a crucial insight. The master has no heir. Yet he's managed to go without taking a concubine for so many years, and it's not solely due to that childhood bond. The mistress's maternal family is the real crux of the matter. I forced myself to stay alert, my voice carrying a barely perceptible edge of tension. Have you found out what kind of background the lady's family has? Xiao Chui whispered as she applied the ointment. The lady's family frequently moves in official circles. Many of the master's important business deals require their connections, so he relies on the lady all the more. My heart sank heavily. No matter how much the master cherishes me, how could he possibly give up the Bai family's support? Having been reborn, am I still destined to repeat the same mistakes? Though Lady Bai stayed only a few days before leaving, she had instilled a stubborn resolve in the mistress. Though the master visits every day, weariness always lingers in his brow, and the look in his eyes toward me is deeply complex, as if words are stuck in his throat. And the closer I got to giving birth, the harder it was for me to sleep at night. I kept dreaming of my daughter crying as she was carried away. Once, forcing a smile, I tested him. Master, are you hoping for a son or a daughter? He always avoided my gaze, merely muttering vaguely, either is fine, as long as the child is safe. I understood what he left unsaid. If it were a son, I would have to return to the Li family immediately, a prospect that likely pained him as well. The night was deep, yet my courtyard was lit as bright as day. I curled up in agony on the bed, my forehead drenched in sweat, the contractions in my womb tearing at my body like 1,000 sharp blades. Miss, push harder. Aunt Sun's anxious voice echoed through the room. Her hands were covered in blood. The maidservant by my side bustled about, bringing water and handing me cloths. Ah, it hurts. My voice was a faint whisper as I clutched the bedsheets. Out of the corner of my eye, a figure remained seated behind the screen. It was the mistress. She held a teacup, her fingertips occasionally tapping the table. as if patiently waiting for something. Overwhelming hatred and fear instantly ignited my remaining strength, and I let out a piercing scream. Wah! A clear, high-pitched cry followed. Aunt Sun shouted joyfully, "She's given birth! She's given birth! It's a girl!" The figure behind the screen set down her teacup with a clatter, and the mistress strode over, her voice rising. "A girl! Bring her here!" Her hand shot out, but Xiao Chui beat her to it, clutching the swaddled infant tightly to her chest and dashing out, shouting hoarsely, "Master, the young lady has given birth. It's a little princess." I watched Xiao Chui's figure vanish through the doorway, and only then did everything go completely dark before my eyes. When I opened them again, the room was bathed in bright daylight. Master was sitting by the bed, carefully cradling the swaddled bundle, a faint smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Madame stood beside him, her face beaming with a smile, though her tone was somewhat firm. "Master, the child's safe arrival is cause for celebration. I think we should take her to my room to be raised as soon as possible, and then find a wet nurse." The master remained silent, his fingertip gently tracing the child's cheek. After a long moment, he said, "The child is still too young. She cannot be separated from her mother. Let Ying care for her for now. Once she's weaned, then..." "Master." The mistress grew frantic and took 2 steps forward. "Mother specifically instructed last time that the child must be taken away from its birth mother as soon as possible, lest over time, unwarranted feelings arise, causing the young lady to lose sight of who the child's true mother is." The master's hand holding the child visibly stiffened, and a hint of hesitation flashed in his eyes. I struggled to sit up. "Master, mistress." The master hurriedly pressed his hand against me. "Don't move about. You're still weak. I know my station is low. I dare not ask for more. But this child, I gave birth to her at the cost of half my life. I only ask that the master let me see her for a few more days, so that when I'm gone, I may still remember her face." "Gone." The master abruptly cut me off, a barely perceptible panic in his voice. "Who said you could leave?" Madame's face turned ashen, and just as she was about to speak, Master had already turned away, his gaze lingering briefly on her face. "It's settled. The child will stay with Ying for now. Once she's weaned, you may take her back and raise her yourself." I later heard that Madame and Master had a terrible argument, and Master was so furious that he didn't return to the main quarters for several days, staying only in his study. As I held my daughter to nurse, Xiao Chui told me all this, and I merely smiled faintly. That day, the master came to the courtyard to keep me company. The weariness etched between his brows was even more pronounced, but it eased slightly when he held our daughter. The new prefect taking office in 2 months. I wonder what sort of temperament he has. He sighed, his fingertips gently brushing the back of the baby's ear. "Everyone in the Merchants Guild is on edge. I fear business will be difficult from now on." I sat with my arms around my knees, listening, when I suddenly recalled a similar episode from my past life. At that time, I had been consumed by the grief of losing my daughter and had paid no attention whatsoever to the affairs of the household. I vaguely recall that the Zhao family was able to weather the storm thanks in no small part to the mediation of the Bai family, the wife's maternal clan. He bent down to amuse the child, speaking to himself. "Come to think of it, it's quite a coincidence he's been transferred here from Jiangnan." I was a bit curious, so I asked offhand, "Tell me about it." "Master, I might just have heard some rumors. His name is Zhou Huimin." Zhou Huimin. The rattle in my hand clattered onto the mattress, and my breath caught in my throat. The master raised an eyebrow and teased, "What's the matter? Could it be you actually know him?" I clutched the edge of the mattress, and after a long moment, managed a forced smile. "You're joking, Master." He didn't think much of it and simply said, "You rest for now. I have official business to attend to." As the master's footsteps faded into the distance, I held my daughter close. my fingertips trembling uncontrollably. It was actually Uncle Joe. Back when my father served as an official in Jiangnan, Uncle Joe was still a scholar. The two formed a bond during a flood. Since they had no daughters of their own, they treated me as their own child, adopting me as their foster daughter from a young age. Later, my family became entangled in factional strife and was imprisoned and exiled. The Zhou family tried to pull strings on our behalf, but the authorities were watching too closely, and in the end, they couldn't save us. A wave of bitterness welled up in my throat, and I lifted my head to gaze at the sun outside the window, a glimmer of hope slowly returning to my eyes. From that day on, I practically counted down the days, waiting day and night for news of Uncle Joe's transfer. Madame, however, was unusually quiet. She never mentioned taking the child away again, nor did she cause me any trouble. Something was definitely amiss. Though I had a premonition, I still had no clue what it was. One day, Xiao Chui practically stumbled in. Miss, the lady. The lady is expecting. What? Amidst my shock, a hint of doubt lingered. Ever since the lady's only son had died, she had spent 10 years consulting renowned doctors and consuming every conceivable tonic, yet there had been no sign of conception. And now, she was actually expecting. It's absolutely true. A renowned physician invited by the Bai family diagnosed it. I hear he's treated many high-ranking officials and nobles. There's no way he could be wrong. Xiao Chui said anxiously. Master is overjoyed at the news. But I hear Madame is suffering terribly from morning sickness and can't keep anything down. If Madame gives birth safely, my fate is all too predictable. As I was pondering this, a servant came to report that someone from Beijing village was seeking an audience and was waiting at the side gate. I sneered inwardly. I'd almost forgotten about that filthy scoundrel. As I led Xiao Chui toward the side gate, I spotted Li Wenhan huddled against the wall from a distance, his eyes darting back and forth over me, finally settling on the golden hairpin in my hair. Ying. He hurried over in a few strides, rubbing his hands together and chuckling. TSK. TSK. Just look at all that silk and brocade. Those gold hairpins and jade bracelets. The Zhao family is truly wealthy. You've grown even more radiant than before. I forced down my nausea, my voice choked with emotion, as if I'd suffered a great injustice. Husband, you've finally come. I knew you wouldn't let me down. Are you here to take me home? His expression changed abruptly, and he hurriedly took a few steps back. I'd love to take you home, but the time hasn't come yet. His eyes darted about, and he put on a pitiful expression, his hand almost reaching for my sleeve before Xiao Chui glared at him fiercely, causing him to sheepishly pull it back. Oh, Ying, if I weren't at my wit's end, how could I bear to let you suffer here? Mother. She's fallen ill again. The doctor says if we don't get medicine soon, she won't make it past 3 days. Go beg the master. You just bore him a daughter. Surely he'll show some mercy, won't he? Seeing that I didn't respond, he grew frantic, raising his voice a notch. He pointed a finger at my nose and began to rant. We were husband and wife. After all, you can't just stand by and watch Mother die, can you? Don't forget. If it weren't for Mother, you'd have frozen to death in the snow long ago. You're living in luxury, decked out in gold and silver, while you watch your own mother die of illness. Are you even human? His spit nearly splashed onto my face. I snapped my eyes up, my voice icy. 50 taels of silver, and you've squandered it all in less than 2 years. If you were truly filial, why did you gamble? You've wasted the silver yourself, and now you expect me to fulfill your filial duties for you. You've lost your mind. Li Wenhan's face turned purple with rage. He raised his hand as if to strike me, but Xiao Sui stepped in front of me to block him. Enough. A furious shout rang out. Master had appeared at the side gate without anyone noticing, his face ashen. Having clearly heard every word of the filthy tirade, 2 burly servants followed behind him. Without so much as a glance at him, the master swept his gaze over the young servant standing with his head bowed. "You good for nothing. How dare you let just any Tom, Dick, or Harry in here? What use are you?" The young servant was so terrified he fell to his knees with a thud. Only then did the master turn to me, his expression complex, tinged with frustration at my lack of resolve. You shouldn't have met him. And you certainly shouldn't have listened to his filthy words." I fell to my knees with a thud, tears streaming down my face. "Please calm down, master. But he is my husband. After all, I can't just stand by and watch my mother-in-law die of illness." With that, I broke down in tears again. "Husband." My master abruptly cut me off, as if those 2 words had stabbed him deeply. "What kind of husband is he to you?" "Someone." My master's voice was icy, carrying an air of unquestionable resolve. "Go to the accounts office, fetch 200 taels of silver, and throw it to that good-for-nothing outside the gate." He pointed at Li Wenhan, whose face had turned ashen, and said, enunciating each word clearly, "From this day forward, Lin Yingying belongs to the Zhao household. She has nothing to do with you anymore. If you dare to come bother her again, you'd better watch your back." Li Wenhan was as if he'd been granted a pardon. He scrambled to his feet and scrambled to grab the silver the servant tossed at him, then ran off without daring to look back. I hung my head, letting Xiao Chui help me up. "Thank you, master, for your kindness." When the mistress learned that the master had completely severed my ties with the Li family, she flew into a rage and smashed every piece of porcelain in the room. However, the die had been cast, and there was nothing she could do. As the months passed and her pregnancy progressed, her health grew weaker by the day. On the day the new prefect took office, merchants from all over the city were scrambling to present their calling cards. My husband prepared gold, silver, fine fabrics, and antique calligraphy and paintings to pay his respects, but was stopped at the gate by the gatekeeper, and never even got to see Magistrate Zhou. I served him a cup of fresh tea at just the right moment and said softly, "My lord, the prefect has just taken office. He must have received plenty of gifts and trinkets from all quarters. Be a dime a dozen. People from Jiangnan cherish the flavors of home. Why not try sending some Jiangnan pastries? First, it won't seem presumptuous, and second, it might soothe his homesickness." His eyes lit up. "You're right. If I demand an audience out of the blue, I'll surely be seen as a sycophant. But is there anyone in the mansion who can make authentic Jiangnan pastries? If you trust me, master, let me give it a try." I bowed my head slightly, a faint smile playing at the corners of my mouth. "Excellent, excellent. Thank goodness for you." The master's eyes sparkled with admiration, and he immediately ordered the steward, "Bring the access token and keys at once and hand them over to Lady Lin. Until the mistress gives birth, all matters great and small in the mansion shall be managed and directed by Lady Lin." I immediately ordered the finest Jiangnan ingredients to be procured and set to work in the kitchen myself. The steam rising from the bamboo steamers blurred my vision. I made an excuse to dismiss my attendants and carefully tucked a tiny folded note into the base of a Dingshan cake. Master soon had the pastries delivered. As expected, the Zhou household accepted them and even sent a reply, inviting Master to visit their residence for a chat. He returned with a radiant glow on his face. "Magistrate Zhou couldn't stop praising the pastries you made. He said he and his wife would personally pay a visit tomorrow, and he specifically asked to meet you." The skilled artisan behind them, father bent down to kiss his daughter's forehead, then looked at me, the warmth in his eyes nearly spilling over. The next day, I dressed early, putting on a simple yet elegant gown. When father led me out, I met my parents' eyes, and my eyes welled up with tears, but I shook my head immediately, signaling them not to make a scene. Father stood by, puzzled. I quickly tried to smooth things over. It's just that seeing a fellow villager brings tears to my eyes. Why don't I show Mrs. Zhou around the estate? When I led her into my courtyard, I could no longer hold back and burst into tears, recounting in detail all the hardships I had endured over the years. Aunt Zhou listened with a heart torn apart, hugging me tightly. Poor child, to have endured so much suffering. It's all our fault. We were useless. We failed to protect you. I lifted my tear-filled eyes and forced a smile. It's all in the past. The master treats me well. I have enough to eat and wear. And I've even had a daughter. Back in the flower hall, though Aunt Zhou's eyes were red, her expression had regained its composure. In front of the magistrate, she affectionately took my hand. Magistrate Zhao. I felt an instant connection with this child. Ying, hearing her tell her life story, I couldn't help but feel deep compassion for her. As I have no daughter of my own, I wish to formally adopt Ying as our goddaughter today. What do you think? Magistrate Zhao, the prefect and his wife's goddaughter. This status was nothing short of a blessing from heaven. The magistrate was taken aback at first, but once he recovered, he sprang to his feet. Such generosity from Magistrate Zhou and his wife is a tremendous blessing for Ying. How could I possibly refuse? Ying, hurry and pay your respects to your adoptive parents. I bowed solemnly, and the last weight on my heart finally lifted. Upon learning that I now held sole authority in the mansion, old Madame Bai actually came in person. I stood at the mansion gate with my maidservant, waiting. When her palanquin came to a stop, I hurriedly knelt to pay my respects. My voice steady. Greetings to the old madam. She, however, ignored me completely and walked straight past. I straightened up, watching her hasty retreat toward the main hall. A faint smile touched my lips as I instructed the maidservant behind me. Take the freshly brewed longjing to the main hall, and prepare some almond pastries. The old lady has always loved them. When I arrived shortly after, I heard an argument coming from inside the main hall. Foolish. Old Lady Bai was furious, her voice trembling. That prescription is a death sentence. I shouldn't have taken pity on you back then. Look at you now. Neither human nor ghost. If this continues, neither you nor the child will survive. The mistress's voice was shrill and frenzied, laced with the desperation of a woman staking everything on a single roll of the dice. I only want this child. I stood beneath the veranda, my heart pounding wildly. No wonder she had conceived so quickly, yet looked so utterly spent. She was gambling with her own life. A chill churned in my chest, and images of my daughter's tragic death in my past life flashed before my eyes. I lowered my head and smiled, though there was not a shred of warmth in my eyes. She brought this upon herself. She never should have lived. A few days later, news came from the main house that she had started bleeding. Medicines to preserve the pregnancy were brewed day and night without cease. The time had come. In the afternoon, I personally carried the bowl of medicine to the main house. As soon as I entered, I saw the mistress, gaunt and emaciated, leaning against a soft pillow, her face as pale as paper. She looked up and saw me, then suddenly grabbed the empty bowl beside her and hurled it at me. Get out! Who told you to come here? I wasn't angered. However, the smile on my face grew even gentler. Please calm down, mistress. I've come to bring you the medicine. Your health is what matters most. Why get so worked up? Ignoring her murderous glare, I sat down leisurely by the bedside and pretended to feed her the medicine. Madam, you'd better drink this decoction sooner rather than later. Otherwise, you might lose this child we've worked so hard to conceive. Her whole body shook violently. You know, Master knows as well. I chuckled softly, pausing deliberately, watching the color drain from her face bit by bit. But he hasn't said a word. No matter how deep our childhood bond may be, it ultimately cannot withstand the judgment of the world, nor the reputation of the Zhao household. Shut up. She lunged at me like a madwoman, trying to tear me apart, but I deftly dodged her, and she stumbled back onto the bed. "Ah!" I gasped in shock as the medicine bowl in my hand crashed to the floor, shattering with a clang, and scalding liquid splashed everywhere. At the same moment, the mistress let out a scream so piercing it sounded inhuman. A torrent of dark red, almost black blood gushed from beneath her, soaking through the brocade quilt as if a floodgate had opened. The room instantly erupted into chaos. The midwife was quickly summoned, and the room was filled with heart-wrenching screams. I stood on the veranda, listening to the commotion inside. 2 hours later, the midwife emerged holding a swaddled infant, her face deathly pale. "Master, it's a boy. We couldn't save the mother, the mistress. She's gone too." A double tragedy. The main courtyard fell silent for a moment, then filled with stifled sobs. The master's face drained of color in an instant. He collapsed into a chair, as if all his vitality had been drained from him. The funeral was grand yet cold. Everyone in the mansion fell silent, and the mistress and her unborn child became taboo subjects within the household. Not long after the dust settled, the master presented the official documents, elevating me to the position of primary wife. And the seal of household authority rightfully fell into my hands. And the very first thing I did was have a carriage prepared to head to Beijing village to inquire about Li Wenhan. To my surprise, that scoundrel had actually managed to trick the village chief's daughter from the neighboring village into marrying him. The girl was already 3 months pregnant and seemed to be living quite a contented life. Oh, I twirled the tea lid in my hand and smiled faintly. I hope he has what it takes. 3 days later, Whitewell village was in an uproar. It turned out Li Wenhan had suffered from a serious illness in his youth and was likely unable to father children. The news spread like wildfire. The village chief's suspicions were immediately aroused, and he had Li Wenhan bound and brought before a doctor for examination. The result was obvious: was completely sterile. The village chief was overcome with shame and fury, vowing to beat him to death. At which point Li Wenhan confessed the whole truth about having sought a surrogate father. The girl fainted on the spot, while the village chief, trembling with rage, pointed at Li Wenhan and raged at him for a long while. Finally, he ordered his men to break Li Wenhan's legs, then dragged him along with his ailing mother out of the village and abandoned them in a dilapidated temple on the outskirts. When news reached us after winter set in, Li Wenhan, with his legs broken and utterly destitute, had been reduced to begging with his mother. They both died shortly thereafter, and when their bodies were discovered, only their mangled remains remained. Come spring, I consulted with Uncle Zhou, drawing on his authority as prefect. He issued proclamations throughout the counties under his jurisdiction, stating that anyone who sold their wife, whether the husband or the go-between, will be punished as if for abducting and selling people, thus completely abolishing the evil custom of selling wives. Not long after, the physician confirmed once more that I was with child. The joy in Master's eyes nearly overflowed. He stood frozen for a long moment before embracing me tightly, but this joy lasted no more than 3 nights. Soon, he began to sit before his late wife's memorial tablet, staying there for half the night at a time, the flickering candlelight casting shifting shadows across his face. One day, as he pressed his ear to my belly to listen for the baby's movements, he couldn't hide the smile on his face. Yet he suddenly sighed. Last night I dreamed of Ronger. She blamed me for not protecting her. He held me close, his chin resting on the top of my head, his voice trembling. Ying Ying, you're all I have left now. I lowered my eyes to hide the fleeting cold gleam in my gaze and gently stroked his back. I know, Master. I'll be here for you, and for the children. The story ends here. Thank you all for reading. See you in the next one.